Morning, can you hear me? So I'm Dave Silbersweig. I'm chairman of Psychiatry and co-director of the Institute for the Neurosciences at Brigham and Women's Hospital, where under David Ahern we have a behavioral e-health and digital behavioral health initiative. And when one considers who would be the ideal collaborator with us as physician, clinician, scientists, trying to bridge the gap that was just alluded to, Ros Pickard, who I have the honor of introducing today, is the perfect person. We're in an era where we have to go beyond the subjective reports of patients to objective, real-time, real-world data that can be analyzed and that can inform diagnosis and treatment and delivery of care for patients who suffer with a myriad of brain-mind disorders. Ros Pickard is a pioneer in the field of medical wearables and analytics that allow us to be able to do such things. She's founder and director of the Affective Computing Research Group at the MIT Media Lab. She is co-director of the Media Lab's Advancing Wellbeing Initiative and the faculty chair of MIT's Mind plus Hand plus Heart initiative. She co-founded Empatica, creating wearable sensors and analytics to improve health, and Affectiva, delivering technology to help measure and communicate emotion. She studied electrical engineering and graduated with high honors from Georgia Institute of Technology. She then went on to get a master's and doctorate in EE and computer science at MIT. She was on the technical staff at AT&T Bell Labs and then came back to MIT's Media Lab, where she is on the faculty and has basically founded the field of affective computing, having written the book of that name and been instrumental in starting journal conferences and a professional society. For all of that and much more, she's been the recipient of many, many honors and awards and prizes. She has over 200 publications, is on many editorial boards and advisory panels, including for the National Science Foundation. She's a fellow of IEEE. And today, we're really lucky to have her speaking with us about connecting emotions, brain, and behavior with medical wearables. So, Ros?
David, thank you so much. Oops. Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here with you this morning, talking about several of my favorite topics. I'm going to tell you a story, and the story begins with work we were trying to do helping people who have difficulty understanding emotion, in particular people on the autism spectrum. And my co-founder of Affectiva and I, Rana El-Kalyoubi, started out trying to help people who were nonverbal learning disabled to read the facial expressions of others. And you can find amazing progress they've made on that out in the exhibitors hall. And one day, while a person we had been working with was giving us feedback, she said to me, actually she couldn't speak, she was typing to talk. She said, "Ros, you have it wrong. Our biggest problem is not reading other people's emotions. It's you not reading our emotions accurately." And at first I felt a little hurt, and then I realized that she wasn't just talking about me, although I needed help to improve, but she was talking about all of us. We're all not as accurate as we could be in interpreting other people's emotions. And as I started to understand what emotions were not being accurately recognized, I learned that there was huge anxiety and stress that was happening on the inside, but it wasn't manifest in clear ways on the outside. And we had been building technology at the Media Lab to help computers understand emotion, and I realized that we could adapt and change some of that to go into this space and help people like this little boy here. So we quickly started to modify a lot of the things we had that involved cumbersome wires and electronics and to understand that the people we were trying to help often had sensory issues and couldn't handle things on their hands or wrist. So we built devices that could go on legs and other parts of the body as well. And I'm wearing actually 2 of them today. The first one is one that's not for the consumer, but it's for researchers, where we have been collecting lots of data to better understand what's really going on with people. This device is called the E4 on my right wrist. And in addition to the Fitbit-like physical activity measures, it's also getting temperature, which is slightly below the surface of the skin, and a very robust 2-color LED-based method for extracting blood volume pulse, and also skin conductance, which you may not be familiar with, and I'll tell you some more about. But these last 2 give us the main indicators we need for autonomic stress. And this is what the data looked like when I'm streaming live from my wrist to an iOS device right now. It works with Android devices also. At the top is the electrodermal activity. This is measured as skin conductance, and this is purely innervated by the sympathetic nervous system. So it goes up with a fight or flight response, and it also tends to go up with things that make you very excited. It tends to especially go up when the person is experiencing a lot of autonomic stress, which is not exactly the same thing as what consumers may call their stress. The bottom, the blood volume pulse, is giving the heart rate information, and it's high quality enough when you're still that we can also extract the heart rate variability, which is very important for isolating a frequency component that gives us the parasympathetic or vagal tone estimate, or that rest and digest signal. Now here's an example of the skin conductance being measured live from a little girl, and we'll turn down the audio on this now because she's going to have a meltdown. From a girl on the autism spectrum. The stuff on her head you can ignore. She's wearing the 2 sensors on her left and right ankles. And what you see in the upper blue screen is the data right now while she's getting ready to have a meltdown, and it's peaking, both signals on the left and the right from her ankles. That blue window at the top right corresponds to that little blue stripe at the bottom, showing us in context 45 minutes of occupational therapy. And this sensor that we built to go out into the wild finally enabled us to get data from children in classrooms and therapy outside of the lab, which is really important because the emotions are about what really matters to you. And emotions need to be measured in the real world, where things that really matter to you are happening. So we could see that not only did it peak when she had this meltdown, but it also was climbing before the meltdown. And we're very interested in enabling people to see when their physiology is escalating in that way and to learn to feel that, even if they have alexithymia and aren't aware of it, so that they can have better emotion regulation control and manage their stress better. We can also see which activities help a person to relax. As we see at the far right here, when she started swinging, she was able to get much calmer. Now, actually, Joey Ito, who was just up here, this was his favorite slide that he blogged about, where for the first time we were able to collect the data continuously, not these little snapshots in the doctor's office, while a person went about their daily activities. And here is 7 days of data, 24 hours a day, from an MIT student who's wearing a wristband measuring the skin conductance. So higher is more arousal, more activated, lower is calmer. And we see at the top it's activated with lab activity, it's lower with television. It's surprisingly activated with sleep, which if you've been paying attention, that doesn't make sense, right? That should be deactivated there. So I'll talk more about that in a moment. And then it's calm with relaxing. And we see each day the same thing, really activated for lab, for homeworks, cognitive load, emotional load. These things are very activating. And on the right, in the yellow, to the embarrassment of we MIT professors, the low point of pretty much every day is classroom activity. Unfortunately, we find that happens with a lot of PowerPoint too, but if I can get you to laugh or interact, the levels go back up. So sleep is the biggest peak of most of the days. Now, this was really troublesome. Like, is this person dreaming of being devoured by tigers, or dreaming of yet another law that raises medical taxes, medical device taxes, or changes the healthcare system again, or whatever the stressor is? But it turned out these peaks are not happening during REM. They're happening during non-REM. And while you can dream in all stages, the physiology does not seem to be associated with the content of the dreams, according to Bob Stickgold, who's an expert on this. So we took Stickgold's study of memory consolidation and looked at maybe these peaks had something to do with focused attention, because during the day when we see them, they happen when you're really engaged in something. And we compared here, there are 6 different machine learning models across the horizontal axis. The top is the accuracy of a binary classifier trying to recognize if the persons in this study, which were 24 healthy adults over 72 nights of sleep, if they, when they learned the task, slept, and were tested on the task, did they perform in the top 20% or did they perform in the bottom 20%? Could we discriminate the people who had better memory consolidation learning from those who had worse? So we looked at the best measures that were known at the time, EEG-based brainwave measurements and polysomnography for stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 REM sleep. Usually more slow wave early in the night and more REM later in the night of a good night's sleep was associated with better memory consolidation and learning. And we found across all 6 models that the red bar there was consistently higher than a measure all here that includes the EEG and polysomnography measures. And what that corresponded to was that the electrodermal activity, that signal I was just showing you on the wrist, was actually doing a better job of predicting memory consolidation in the brain than brainwave activity. Now this is a very simplified diagram up here. There's a paper going into much more detail on this. But this kind of, I don't know about you, but it kind of bugged me. Like, you know, this goes up with sweat, right? You know, we're measuring temperature also during sleep. It's not just going up with temperature. You know, what is this, right? We still have a bit of a mystery here, but we're getting pieces of it now. And this next story is going to lead to one of the key pieces. So once you build something that can leave the lab, people come and want to borrow it. And this is a sweatband that had embedded in it our electrodermal activity sensors early on. And it was the end of the semester, and one of the undergrads who worked in my lab said, "Professor Pickard, could I please borrow one of your sensors? My little brother has autism, he can't speak, and I want to see what's stressing him out over vacation." And I said, sure. In fact, don't just take one, take 2, because back then the wires often broke. Oh, and do you need a soldering iron? And he said, no, I have a soldering iron. Okay, MIT students, that's great. So I gave him 2 sensors. He had his own soldering iron. I'm back in my office looking at the data. And I see this day looks pretty normal. Oh, first of all, I saw he put the 2 sensors on at the same time. He didn't wait for one to break. And I thought, well, that doesn't make sense. You know, cancel out some noise. 2 sides should be the same. The next day looked kind of normal, autonomic data for what looked like a healthy kid. Next day looked pretty normal. I go to the next day, and my jaw drops. One of the wrist signals had gone so high that it was impossible. We have stressed people out in every way we can imagine, ethically, at MIT, including one of our papers winning Best of the Decade for Boston driver stress, where skin conductance turned out to be the most predictive factor, even better than heart rate variability. And we have popped balloons in people's ears, given them qualifying exams, all kinds of things, and nobody's stress looked as high as this. And furthermore, it was only on one side. The other side wasn't responding at all, and I thought, okay, this one must be broken because it can't go that high, and this one must be broken because it's not responding. And furthermore, the weird thing was the data looked perfectly fine right before and after this weird event. So I tried with my electrical engineering hat on to figure out how to debug this. And finally, I gave up after many attempts. And I did something I've never done before. I called the student at home over vacation. Hi, how's your vacation going? How's your little brother? Sorry to bug you. Hey, any idea what happened to him on this date and this time? And I gave him the exact information. And he said, I don't know, I'll check the diary. Diary? MIT student keeps a diary? And I'm, you know, quick prayer. And he comes back and he has exactly the date and the time. And he says that was right before he had a grand mal seizure. Now, I don't know about you, but I didn't really know anything about seizures, but I started learning a little bit, and I got on the phone with another friend's dad. We have this amazing medical community here in Boston, as you're part of and know well, and called Dr. Joe Madsen, chief of neurosurgery over at Boston Children's Hospital. Hi, Dr. Madsen. You don't know me. My name's Rosalind Picard. Is it possible that a patient could have a huge sympathetic nervous system surge? In this case, it looked like it was 20 minutes before the seizure, that far before a seizure. And he said, probably not. But, it's interesting. We've had patients whose hair stands on end on one arm before a seizure sometimes. On one arm, I said. And then I fessed up and told him, this was only on one side. Is that possible? And he was like, oh yeah, that's definitely possible. So we got to talking. We made a whole lot more sensors. We got them safety approved, IRB approved, 90 patients enrolled in a study he already had. And we found that 100% of the grand mal seizures that were measured with gold standard clinical video electroencephalography, while we were also measuring electrodermal activity, had this response that was more than 2 standard deviations above the pre-seizure, pre-ictal period. Here's an example of 3 of them from a boy. Here's 24 hours of data, electrodermal activity. Those peaks in the middle, remember how sleep peaks for the MIT student were usually the biggest peak of the day? These are his sleep peaks. These seizures are so big compared to the sleep peaks. I'm used to doing a lot of numerical analysis, machine learning analytics on data you can't even see here. It's down like under the ground cover of the forest here. And I'm used to working at that level of detail, and all of a sudden I'm bumping into a redwood tree. So I'm thinking, wow, we need to do something about this. By the way, all this work is published, and you can find it on a link I'll give you at the end. We also wondered about the size of these peaks. These red lines here, they're very narrow. That's where the doctors labeled the seizure events, and they are only a couple minutes wide. But the black stuff that we're getting off the wrist, the size of that electrodermal response, is enduring much longer. And at first we thought, well, maybe it's convulsions and the person's shaking and getting sweaty. Turns out it's not at all related to that. So we said, what is it related to? Does it mean anything? It's very unusual. It's not normal autonomic behavior, and it's lasting quite some time. And after a bunch more work in collaboration with Children's Hospital and Toby Lodenkemper and Madsen and others, we found that the duration of time that the brain waves shut down, went below 10 microvolts on the cortex after the seizure, was highly correlated with the size of this response on the wrist. Now again, this is bizarre, right? Like, this is, these shutdown signals seem to be coming from deep brain regions. The cortex is saying nothing's going on, the person looks brain dead, and yet we're getting a whopper of a signal on the wrist. So we began to dig around a bunch more with this, and we realized that we had a wrist-worn biomarker for a very important brain event that is connected with, unfortunately, the most dangerous seizures, the ones that cause SUDEP. Sudden unexpected death in epilepsy takes more lives every year than sudden infant death syndrome, than AIDS, than house fires. And a seizure is like a little electrical house fire in your brain. And if it spreads, your whole brain can have this aberrant activity. And nobody would build a house without a smoke detector, but they send people home without seizure detectors all the time. And yet, if somebody gives an alert and you come and check on them while they have a seizure, then they can actually start breathing again and have their life saved in very many cases. SUDEP usually happens when the patient is alone. So we decided that we had to do something about this. So even though I was kind of focused on emotion, I had to take a little detour. And so I'll share that with you here.
Embrace is designed to be a gorgeous watch and a medical quality device. It's made of leather and metal, it's very easy to wear, and it has a ring that illuminates time, both hours and minutes. In today's world of non-stop action, it's tough to achieve the right balance. Embrace makes it very easy to monitor physiological stress, arousal, sleep, and physical activity. You can see how you're doing at work, while running, during dinner or sleep. You can set Embrace to give private vibration alerts. You can learn how to reduce stress and feel better. You can also send an alert to a friend or a loved one. You can learn about yourself in a way that is easy to understand. But Embrace does even more.
Our device is designed to detect unexpected seizures. Embrace is designed to save lives for a lot of people with epilepsy. Seizures can seriously hurt or even kill people, and we need an alert to intervene. 1 in 26 people in the US will develop epilepsy at some point during their lifetime. Everybody with epilepsy should be able to have a device that alerts a friend or a family member to come help at the time that they might need it.
This device will measure both movement and physiological signals. The combination is likely to be very important for detecting potentially life-threatening seizures.
All right, so we launched an Indiegogo campaign. We were blessed to get it fully funded and also to be able to arrange that for each device that cost under $200 that people could afford to buy to help somebody in need, we were able to donate one to a family who could not afford a $200 device. And in fact, it's been very heartwarming to see families even run their own GoFundMe campaigns to raise the money for a device for their child. Now, I'm close to wrapping up here. This led us from peripheral sympathetic and autonomic sensing related to emotion to ask what was going on deep inside. And this is a much longer talk that I don't have time to give you here, but I just want to give you a teaser. We're finding that direct stimulation of regions of the brain directly involved in anxiety, emotion, and fear and threat in particular. Things like the right amygdala, when stimulated, give a right skin conductance response, or the left amygdala, when stimulated, gives a left skin conductance response. We're now looking at biomarkers in depression and a bunch of other interesting conditions. And this is showing us that it not only explains why we could have a response on one side when one region of the brain is activated, but it's also telling us that our original idea that this was just kind of a peripheral general response of emotional arousal, it carries a lot more information than what we originally thought. It's not just sweat, it's not just general arousal, but there are different signals going to different regions of the body. And now our challenge is to start to understand those and map that out with real-life technology that can tell us what's going on in everyday experience. We are now looking not only at seizures, but also at stress disorders and how different factors of daily life can hopefully help an individual better understand and maybe even gain better control over those events. This is different than trying to predict a seizure right before it happens. I'll have to say we do not usually get a signal 20 minutes before the seizure, but we do get the data that people say makes it more likely that their seizures are going to be triggered. The sleep changes, the stress changes, the physical activity changes. And this is turning out to be of interest not only for seizures, but also for migraines and a whole lot of other conditions as well. And we've now gone full loop. Not only will Embrace ship with a seizure alert, actually, we're just applying for FDA, so scratch what I just said. That's my MIT hat speaking. The Empatica hat it ships with an alert for unusual autonomic and motion events right now. We just happen to have published on the MIT side a bunch of the seizure stuff. But it also is shipping with an app that can gently vibrate to let you or a loved one know when your autonomic activities are starting to escalate. So when the Media Lab director years ago asked me for the mood ring that tells him his wife's mood before he goes home, this is, it's got the temperature sensor in it, but more important than that, it's got a very important indicator of that sympathetic nervous system stress that you can choose if you want to share with somebody that you trust. So this has been a big whirlwind, starting with trying to help understand people who had difficulty understanding emotion, learning from them things like how they were misunderstood with this autonomic data, learning that in our daily life it could inform things like our own educational instruction, finding peaks during sleep and learning that they actually might be related to memory consolidation, and now being able to get this work out of the lab and onto the wrists and legs of people whose lives can hopefully benefit significantly. Thank you so much.